What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we return with Chaney of Entheos. Great to talk to you again after, 3 months since NAM?
Yeah, I think it's almost exactly 3 months. It's good to talk to you as always.
Yeah, always great to see you, NAM. Those were the good days, back in the good
Yeah.
days when socializing was cool. But the newest single, Remember You Are Dust, is absolutely awesome. Could this maybe serve as like a clear representation of what the entirety of the follow-up to Dark Future is, or is this just the tip of the iceberg for the new Entheos album?
This is definitely just the tip of the iceberg. Our thought process with Remember Your Dust is that we knew that we were moving forward without Travis in our band and that it was just Naveen and I now. And we just really wanted to get a single out there along with the announcement so that there wasn't any ongoing question of, are they going to be able to pull this off with just the two of them, or is it going to be horrible? Or we just didn't want to leave anyone guessing. And so we wrote Remember Your Dust earlier this year. Actually, we had a different song planned to put out, but when it came down to putting the other song out, it just didn't resonate with us in the same way, and it wasn't working in the studio the same way. So we kind of were just messing around, and we put on this new track that ended up becoming Remember Your Dust that Naveen had been writing. And whereas the other track, we were kind of forcing things out, with this song, everything really flowed perfectly, and we're really proud with how it turned out. However, it's a more straightforward death metal song, I would say. And we're just one of those bands that's constantly going to evolve and change. And while some of the stuff that we're writing for the album does sound like Remember Your Dust, obviously, because Naveen's influence is all over all of Entheos, it's not, the whole album isn't going to sound like that. Like, we still are very much a proggy death metal trippy band.
I like that. I like that way of describing it. But like when you look at the entirety of the Entheos catalog, whether it was like the Primal EP or the Infinite Nothing or Dark Future to this, does it almost kind of like serve as like a timeline, or maybe kind of like a self-portrait on who you and Naveen like were at that particular time?
I think that it's me and Naveen and Evan. Evan had a huge voice in our band, and primarily on Dark Future, like, Evan was really Evan and Naveen did a lot of the songwriting. And so I think it's more of an indication of that and of who we had on guitar, because a lot of the time Naveen was writing parts to adhere to who was on guitar. And I think that that's actually, I mean nothing against our past guitar players with this, because I still love them dearly. But I just think that now that's kind of stripped away. And now we're just being a little more honest about what is happening in the band and who's writing the music. And so I think it's more of a timeline of where we've grown and who's been playing with us. And now it's just Naveen only. So we'll continue moving forward with the Entheos sound 100%, because like I said, Naveen is the primary songwriter. He always has been, but it's a culmination of where we are and where other people have been.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, in terms of, like, the Entheos sound, I've always thought you guys were very experimental, because I still find it insane that you have an album, like, that has Black Static, Melancholia, Pulse of a New Era, The World Without Us, like, all on the same album that all have many different vibes and emotions. I mean, trying new things seems to almost kind of play a role into what makes Entheos, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% why we started the band and what we've always been about. And I think that just because of where our outside influences come from, we love death metal, we always have, but we also love a lot of other shit. We listen to Zappa and all kinds of jazzy, classic rock and electronic music and everything in between. So our influences are always going to come from a million different places, but they're all going to be put under the the Entheos microscope. And yeah, you're totally right. That's where a lot of our experimenting comes from, and that's never going to end.
Yeah. Does it always start off with a preconceived idea, or has like a lot of the stuff like kind of just in a way, like have you ever experienced like happy accidents in a way where something that you never expected to happen ended up making it on the album or something like that?
Oh yeah, our whole band is a happy accident. I mean, it's very rare that we go into writing an album with a 100% predetermined idea of what we're going to do. That's just not how we work. And for instance, on Dark Future specifically, Evan and Travis came and stayed with Naveen and I for 2 weeks, and everyone was kind of writing together. And so it's just, yeah, Entheos is... there was nothing like discussed before that experience about, okay, we're going to get together and it's going to sound, we're going to have a bunch of songs that sound kind of different from each other. That's just never how it is for us. It always ends up working that it's a building process more than it is something that we sit down and totally discuss. I mean, with this next album and with Remember Your Dust, one thing that we did talk about, and this is more where our conversations are, that we're like, okay, we need to focus on songwriting a little more. And I think that's really evident with Remember Your Dust, because if you like peel it back, it is a song. It's got 2 verses, it's got a chorus in it, and it's got like a breakdown-y part. It's a song. And that's really the type of thing that we're more focused on, as opposed to, okay, we want to go make a black metal album. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're focusing more on the overall experience than like specifically what we want the music to sound like.
Yeah, and it almost seems like with Remember You Are Dust, like with the release of that, I've been loving like the photo shoots that you've had. Like the visuals behind this is just incredible. Like, was there like maybe kind of like a vision, like a visual aspect into behind like the making of this new album and everything like that as well that you were focused on?
Absolutely. Okay, so that is something that we have discussed. One thing that I think Naveen and I would totally agree on is that in the past, it's been like a misplaced image with the band. It's kind of been like, what's going on? Like, you guys make proggy music and maybe the photos aren't really indicative of that. And, you know, we wanted it to be more of a uniform vision as far as the aesthetics of the band go. And really, it's stuff that we talked about from the beginning that was just kind of hard to execute, because when you have 4 band members and 2 of them live in the same place and the other 2 live in different states, it's hard to get everyone together for a photo shoot or a music video and have it just be like a super well thought out vision in the way that we can now. So I've got to give the photo cred up to Michelle Nisbet and Marshall Wieserak, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's Black Dahlia Murder's sound guy, and they came down to our house and we did that photo shoot, all of the photos that you're seeing, in like 6 or 7 hours, and they just totally nailed the vision that we have for the band going forward.
Did this vision come in after you made the music in a way, or maybe did like a visual or like an artistic vision maybe help influence the songwriting even further?
Yeah, the artistic vision definitely helped influence the songwriting even further. Actually, the art for Remember Your Dust I had before the song was even named Remember Your Dust.
Really?
I knew exactly what I wanted, and it's the same for our upcoming album. Like, I know exactly what I want the artist to do, and I've already talked to him about it, but I don't have a title for it yet. But it is kind of like, I'm a visual person. I love movies, and I love art and aesthetics, and that's kind of how I've been working with this stuff, because I'm primarily in charge of the art at this point in the band.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, it's funny because I've always thought, as somebody who has seen you now so many times, you know, it's one thing to see a really cool band, but like there really was a visual aspect behind Entheos. Like when I saw you on the Rivers of Nile tour back last year, it was just incredible watching the lights move along with how you all moved on stage and stuff like that. Like, when it comes to creating like visual art in a way, is there maybe a similar creative aspect to creating a visual as there is to creating music, or is it almost kind of like splitting your mind in two when you're focusing on the art versus the music?
I think that both of those things that you just said can happen. It's always been a goal of ours too on stage. Like from an early point, we knew that we wanted our stage production to be there. Even if we didn't totally have the money to like bring out a light guy or hire a light guy, we were going to find a way to do it. So that whole light show talking about is MIDI programmed. And then it's like, I don't feel like I'm splitting my mind in two, or any of us are, because you have to have the music to like build the production off of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in order for the stage show to look the way it does, you kind of have to understand the vibe that you're going for with the music. And for us, I think that we've always wanted to go for this dark, trippy vibe. And we knew that going into the light show. And it's cool that people take notice to our stage production because it's something that we really, really thought out. And I think that it helps enhance the show.
Yeah. Do you almost kind of have to like practice performing with that visual aesthetic in a way? It's one thing, you obviously have to practice to execute your songs well, but then it almost seems like playing live. And I know you told me at NAMM that the live performance is like your favorite part of the band, but like is there almost kind of like a choreography that you also have to practice as well?
No, there's actually not. It's all just the same that it's like the same stuff that we do whether there's a light show or not. There's no extra thinking on our part about how we're going to act with the light show. But I will say that I think it makes us look a lot cooler. It's a lot more forgiving when you have a light show and like fog and production on stage, because it can be really weird being a band on a lit stage with the crowd being lit the same way. There's something that feels like there's no separation between performance and crowd, and I guess it just depends on like what kind of band you want to be in or what you want to do with it. Because like if I go to a hardcore show, I really like the like stage light and the crowd lighting to be the same, because there's like a real sense of interaction. But I like about the light show that it causes that separation and makes it a little more like a theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't really know where I was going with that, but
yeah. Well, I feel like when I saw you at the Rivers of Nile show, because I've seen you at like Gramercy Theater twice. I saw you on the Allegiant tour and Rings of Saturn tour with that at Gramercy, and the Contortionist show. And
yeah.
but I've seen you play at like St. Vitus, where it's just as good of an experience. But at St. Vitus, like, you know, there was people jumping off the stage. I definitely had to watch my ass a couple of times at that show. I don't know if you remember, but I was like sitting on the stage with you guys because I was scared.
I sort of remember. It's really hard for me to see people while I'm playing.
Yeah. But I feel like you have the best of both worlds. I think you have a crowd interactive element to it where people could go nuts, but then you also have like the part where if people are watching from the back, they're not missing anything. They're just as immersed into your show.
Well, that's awesome. That's the best compliment I could receive, because I think that's really the goal for us. You know, coming from both hardcore and metal backgrounds and being into bands who have more of a theatrical thing going, like Dimmu, for example, that's really cool that we're able to pull that off, and that you can see that as well, and it's not just something that we're sitting and wanting within the band that no one else is understanding.
Yeah. Do you find that, though, obviously because of the production, and I actually talked to Watain about this, who thrives on production and stage setup. But
dude, Watain, amazing. Yep. Amazing band.
That was a phenomenal interview, too. Eric is such a nice guy.
Yeah.
I've said the best way to describe them: evil music for nice people.
Yeah, that's really good.
But like being, you know, obviously you're playing in different types of venues. Like, you know, at Summer Slaughter, you were playing like at more larger venues, but then at, like, you know, you're playing like some clubs. Like I know that Sadly, it's not happening, but the Allegiant tour that you were supposed to embark on, that was going to be at a roughly smaller venue. So do you almost find, like, depending on the venue, too, you have to kind of adjust the production in that regard as well?
I wouldn't say production, performance for sure. Performing in a big venue is a lot different than performing in a small venue, because when you're playing like a House of Blues stage or something like that, you feel like you're putting on a concert. It doesn't feel like a show as much. And I think that those shows do tend to be a little less interactive with the crowd. And yeah, that's really the only thing. I think that at like a small club show, there's more of a sense of freedom to like freak out and like be all over the place, and the crowd is there with you, and it's like this intermingling of sweat and screaming, and there's something that I really love and thrive off of in a small venue, just because that's the type of thing that I grew up in. And I remember the first time I played a House of Blues stage, I was like, this stage is so fucking big. What am I going to do with all of this room? So it's more in that aspect than the production. I mean, if you're playing a big venue, you're going to throw in some more lights for sure. But overall, it's more in the performance.
Yeah, of course. And I remember kind of going back to what you said about the songwriting element, because could this new album, and I think we touched upon this at NAMM a little bit as well, but like especially looking at the font on your cover photo on Facebook, that where the logo looks very cult in a way, like very black metal. Could people who may have discovered you on Dark Future, or maybe even like The Infinite Nothing or something like that, could people maybe expecting the new album to have some elements of that, or is this record going to be like a complete, I don't want to say abandoning of what you do, but like maybe a brand new chapter for Entheos?
We're never going to abandon who we were. That's just it. We're really proud of the band that we've become, and we're really proud of every step of the way. You're always going to hear aspects of the past in our future stuff, simply because with Naveen being the main songwriter, I think you can hear aspects of his old bands. I think you can even hear aspects going all the way back to Animosity in our band. So there is an integral part of this that's always going to be around, but we're always going to evolve. So, Remember Your Dust, I think it's pretty indicative of the old Entheos, if you will. It's still there, and we're just building off of it rather than abandoning. We're not ashamed of anything that we've done, or we're ourselves, and it's hard to get rid of a piece of yourself. It's just always going to be there with you in some way or another. So yeah, it's just going to be growth. It's always growth. It's never abandonment.
Okay. And I noticed that you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you and Naveen have been doing like a podcast too, right?
Yeah, we have. It's called Copper Crab Podcast.
That's awesome. I love that name. But has maybe like, because I think podcasting, what people don't realize is podcasting is a very creative, like I consider a podcast to be like a work of art in a way, because of how organic the conversation is and how it really does capture a moment. So has maybe working this podcast maybe influenced you a little bit at all, or is this just kind of like an escape from music in a way, and it has nothing to do with the other?
Oh no, it's absolutely an influence. But I'm the type of person who, I think I've talked with you about this before. It's like, I really feel like every person is inspired by everything that happens in their life, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And I think that it is just a guarantee that there's some part of us doing this podcast that is become a part of our psyche and the people that we are. There are a lot of things that have changed because of it. I'm sure that you have gone through this experience doing what you do, but you learn a lot from people who you have on the show, or just from conversations that Naveen and I have. We're all about growth and mind expansion, and every conversation leads to something different. And there's no action that I can take in this life that isn't going to be a part of my next action, if that makes any sense.
100%.
Yeah, it's like everything that I do is Chaney, so every part of Chaney is going to be a part of every other part of Chaney.
Yeah.
So it's inescapable to me.
It sounds kind of like the butterfly effect in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. You go back in time and you change one aspect of your life, and you could be a completely different person today than you would have been.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think. And, like, you almost think it alters life. Like, if I didn't sneeze this morning when I woke up, don't worry, I don't have the virus. But if I didn't sneeze this morning when I woke up, how different could this interview have gone? You know what I mean? There's always that sort of, like, I've always was worried that, like, a day is kind of like a set of chromosomes. One little thing off could alter the whole cell. So...
Absolutely, that's a great way to put it. I mean, I'm just even thinking about this, me talking to you right now. This is, I think, the third or fourth interview that we've done together over a span of, I want to say, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And our conversation now is much different than the first conversation that we had, because we are friends now. We know each other. And I'm sure, and that first interview that we had completely changed the outcome of this interview. And everything, you know, me meeting you has changed my life in some way, and that's how every moment is.
That's amazing. And, you know, kind of, I feel like your songs in a way do capture a moment, especially like Melancholia, the way that it just goes right into it. It's like you're capturing a moment. It almost seems like your songs are like a snapshot in a way, or something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that is partly because of the music, and partly because of the way that I write lyrics, which is very biographical of my life. I'm writing about life. I don't write about, you know, some lyricists approach things by, I'm going to write a story, and I'm writing about my life and the things I'm going through. And that song in particular, it was about missing my hometown and all of my friends and everything that I moved away from. And I think that rapid, in-your-face part of it is a good way to experience, like, depression and being kind of manic and having anxiety. So it's definitely capturing a moment.
Yeah, but do you find, especially with how technically impressive the music is, do you, like, find it harder the longer that you're working on a song? Because sometimes you're working on a song for hours, days, months. Like, do you find it harder to maintain that moment the longer you work on something?
Yes and no. For me, it's kind of easy to snap myself back into what I was feeling when I wrote those words. So it's easy for me to read, like, a line that I may have written, or hear my voice and put myself back in that situation, and maybe not back in the specific situation, but, like, experiencing the emotional aspect of it through what I'm going through now. So that's never really been a hard thing for me.
And then when you replicate that in the live presence and you go back and play it, that particular song that often, does it almost kind of like put you back? Is it almost kind of like a time warp in a way?
Absolutely. I mean, I can point out Suspended Animation specifically, which is a song from Dark Future. My friend had killed himself right after, it was actually the last day of the tour that we did with Dillinger Escape Plan. Before we went on stage that night, I found out that, you know, he was gone, and that's what Suspended Animation is about. Every time I perform that song, I think of him, whether I want to or not, especially at the end. And that's just what songs are to me. And that's what's so cool about this, like, diary through music, is that you can be transported back into that feeling that you had when you were writing that song.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing to see, because you're also you're taking your experience and you're sharing it with people. And I think we talked about this either in the first or second interview that we had, but is the music open to interpretation, or do you try to maybe engage the listener into seeing things from your point of view?
It's a little bit of both. I've always been the type of I've always been, like, the type of poetic fan who is into things that I can kind of take in my own direction. And I will name Anthony Green specifically from Circus Survive, Seosin, Sound of Animals Fighting. His lyrics, I think they all point to something, but they're slightly vague, and every person can interpret them as with their own life, and that's always something that I've wanted to achieve. I want people to maybe understand what I'm talking about, but also be able to take the things that I'm saying and hear them when they may be going through a different situation than I was, and still have those lyrics be applicable.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And I mean, you clearly don't have a problem explaining what the lyrics mean. I had no idea what suspended animation was about, and I'm very sorry that you had to deal with that pain. But like, it almost like if a listener comes up to you and says, "This is what I saw in this song," and it's like nothing to do with what you were going through, it was just their own experience. Can that change on how you look at that song in a way?
Absolutely, absolutely. It 100% can change how I look at that song. And really, when people tell me things like that, I just think of how awesome it is that through words, we can all have different experiences. That's the thing that I've always loved about lyrics and poetry, is that it doesn't matter who you are. You can read simple words on a page and interpret them in your own way, and that's really beautiful. It's the same as looking at a piece of art, an abstract piece of art. Yeah, I may think something completely different about the Mona Lisa than you do, and that's what's so fucking great about it.
Yeah, of course. And kind of like the final question is like, do you kind of look for inspiration, or do you just like think of something out of the blue? I'd imagine, knowing the type of writer that you are, you almost have to keep a notebook on you at all times, right?
Yeah, I do keep a notebook on me. I take a notebook to work. I write on my phone. I have a closet full of probably 20 notebooks that I've had over the last 10 years. Everything is an inspiration, like I said earlier, so I can find inspiration in the mundane, but sometimes I'm not inspired at all, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to read a book, and maybe that will inspire me. However, I don't force it. I don't like things to feel or sound forced, so it's not something that I'm like prying out of myself when it's not there, but inspiration can come at the weirdest times. So yeah, it's always important to me to have some kind of writing utensil around.
Yeah, and you mentioned you don't regret any move you make, which I think is great for an artist to say. But like, I gotta ask, if you don't mind, but has there ever been a time where maybe you looked at like something that you wrote from years and years and years ago, where you were like a completely different person? And you're like, wow, I'm glad I'm not that individual anymore, or something like that.
Well, I'm sure I could go look through a lot of my 8th grade notebooks and just completely not agree with who I was at that time. Luckily, I've never really, I guess luckily for me, for someone else, they might not be into this, but I've never really gone to like crazily opinionated with my lyrics. They've always been sort of vague and poetic. So I can look back on things and sort of appreciate them for what they are. But to say that I wouldn't go back and change things even on Primal or even Dark Future would be a lie. There are things that I would change, but I'm not ashamed of any of that stuff or who I was at that time. I think it's like getting a tattoo. It's a cool picture of who you were. It's like a memoir, and I can't change it. I can't get this Iowa tattoo off of my arm. But, you know.
You have by Slipknot's Iowa tattoo?
I have a tattoo of the state of Iowa because I'm from there.
Oh, okay. So, I was thinking Slipknot for a second.
No.
I keep forgetting since I discovered that album that Iowa is actually a state.
I know. They kind of put Iowa on the map and made it, God, what's the word for words that, I was thinking of this yesterday because I was thinking of another, like a band's name that I don't associate with the words that they are now at all.
Oh, there's a lot of bands like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of bands like that, but there's got to be a name for that phenomenon. But anyway, that's funny. I was just thinking of that yesterday.
Yeah. But, I mean, and it seems like lyrically you're able to be very literal and metaphorical. You're able to approach it from many different angles. Does that art come, like, naturally to you, or is it almost kind of like something that you have to study and practice in a way?
That is something that's come naturally to me. I've always been a writer. My earliest memory is me wanting to be a writer. I wrote for my high school newspaper. I've written poetry. I remember just zoning out in school, not paying attention to what the teacher was saying, but writing books and books of poetry and writing down other people's lyrics to kind of like see where their wordplay and wordflow was. So it's not something, I can't say I've ever studied it. I'm sure there are things that I've done, like what I was just saying, that have aided in study, if you will, but I've never gone out of my way to say, or to like look up, how do you write metaphorically?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just something I kind of fell into.
Yeah, not to discredit the education aspect of it at all, but it almost seems like everybody is their own experience. Can you really tell somebody how to write in a way? Like I'm not trying to sound like the rebel. Like there's no rules in art; it's all you. Like sure, there's practice that you could do in certain historical and theoretical elements, but like everybody's experience is so different. Can you really tell how to write about an experience that you never had? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I totally know what you mean, and I completely agree with where you're coming from. Education is important, but it's like, say with an education in music, it's important to know all of the things about, quarter notes and 16th notes and all of and scales and all of that. That's really important. But what's more important is what you do with those things. All of the education and everything, it's just a tool. But at the end of the day, the artist or the true musician is a true musician. And I think that they would kind of exist, or that before they got those tools, they were a musician. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's always great to talk to you. Is there just anything with Entheos that you would like to... I know that things are probably tough right now after the Allegiant tour had to get postponed. Is there just any way that the fans could support you during this time, and anything else with Entheos that you would like to promote?
Yeah, so we've got a merch store. Go there. If you search Entheos on the internet, all of this stuff will come up. It's a big cartel. Go buy stuff from there. Go check out Copper Crab Podcast. We have some really cool shit coming up with Entheos through a metal site on the internet. They have this really cool idea, and I won't go too far into it because I'm not sure what I can and can't divulge. But that will be late May. There's some really cool stuff going on, like regarding this whole COVID-19 situation. So look out for that. We're going to be putting up playthroughs, and yeah, we'll probably put out some more new songs this year. So
yeah, and I mean, I gotta say, being a writer, this is isolation always seems to be the greatest fuel for just any form of art. So I'd imagine that you're using this time for creativity pretty well, right?
Absolutely, man. It's hard to be locked up at my house and not feel creative. I wrote an entire song. Just me. I think I'll probably put out a solo project sometime in the future. So I wrote an entire song for that, and I've been gardening and being artistic, drawing and doing all of that stuff. It's almost like my favorite time to write is 2 a.m. because I feel like everyone else is just being like lazy and asleep, and this kind of feels like 2 a.m. all the time.
I love that. That's amazing. And I just have a feeling that this new Entheos album is going to be a double album because you'll just have so much ideas.
It might be, man. We're getting crazy over here.
But great to talk to you. Everybody, Entheos, new music coming soon. Be sure to check out the new single, Remember You Are Dust. Be sure to check out their merch. There will be a link in the description below to their merch store. Be sure to support them if you can. And we'll see you next time on Heavy New York.